Okay, when we're trying to prove if lines are parallel, it's going to sound exactly like what we did last lesson where we were told the lines were parallel and we had to find angle measures. This time, we're going to have angle measures and then from those angle measures determine if the lines that form those angles are parallel. And it's called the converse of what we just did. If you remember from when we did the logic unit, the converse is to flip your original conditional. So remember our original conditional was that if two lines are parallel, then corresponding angles are congruent. Well, the converse of that says that if you have a pair of corresponding angles that is congruent, then the two lines that form those corresponding angles are parallel. So in this picture, because these two corresponding angles are congruent, then we can determine that line L is parallel to line M. The inverse of that would be that if a pair of corresponding angles is not congruent, so if we take this 35 and look at its corresponding angle, which is 27, they are not congruent, then we can determine that line L is not parallel, and I'm just going to put a slash mark through the parallel sign. Line L is not parallel to line M. The alternate interior angles converse says that if you have a pair of alternate interior angles, so if we look here and here, we have our Z, and inside that Z we find our alternate interior angles. Well, if your alternate interior angles are congruent, then the two lines that form them are parallel. So the information that we can gather from this picture is that because the two alternate interior angles are parallel or congruent, then line L is parallel to line M. If your alternate interior angle pair of alternate interior angles is not congruent, so 35 does not equal 27, and they're alternate interior angles. If they're not congruent, then we can determine that line L is not parallel to line M. Your alternate exterior angle converse says that if a pair of alternate exterior angles is congruent, so 101 and 101, those are our alternate exterior angles. They're on alternate sides of the transversal, exterior most angles. Then if they are congruent, then the two lines that form those alternate exterior angles, line L and line M, are parallel because alternate exterior angles are congruent. If alternate exterior angles are not congruent, then the two lines that form them are not parallel. So here's one alternate to this alternate exterior angle, and 98 is not equal to 120. So we can determine that line L is not parallel to line M. And if you recall, consecutive interior angles, when the lines are parallel and they form consecutive interior angles, remember that consecutive interior angles are not supposed to be congruent. They're going to be supplementary. And if you have a pair of consecutive interior angles that are supplementary, then the lines that form those consecutive interior angles are parallel. So remember, they're consecutive, one right after the other. They're inside the two lines, and they should have a sum of 180. Well, 101 and 79 is 180. So yes, line L here is parallel to line M. If you have consecutive interior angles that are not supplementary, then line L and line M, or the two lines that form those consecutive interior angles, are not parallel. So 35 and 117, 117 plus 35 gives you 152. That's not supplementary. That's not equal to 180. So line L is not parallel to line M. Okay, so let's see a few examples of what will be expected of you from this lesson. Now we're going to determine which lines are parallel, if there are any. Well, if you notice, we're looking for our different angle relationships, and we can find them within this picture if we do a little manipulation. So remember, linear pair and vertical angles, those relationships are always true whether or not you have parallel lines. It doesn't matter if you have parallel lines. So always fill in your picture based on those two relationships, and then see if you can find your parallel line relationships. So the first thing I'm going to do here is find out what this angle is based off of the linear pair postulate, which says that if you have a linear pair, which we do, this angle and this angle, then that linear pair is supplementary. So in order to find the missing angle, I'm going to subtract this 103 from 180, and I'm going to get 77. Okay? I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to find the linear pair to this angle 77. So I would take 180 and subtract my 77, and what do you know? We get 103. And then up here, or down here, I'm going to do that again. I'm going to take my linear pair. I'm going to subtract 100 from 180 because my linear pair is supplementary, and that'll give me this missing angle here. So 180 minus 100 gives me 80. And now that I've found my missing angles, I can look for my parallel line relationships. Well, right away, let me clear up some of this. Right away I notice that I have a pair of corresponding angles here and here. And if you remember that if corresponding angles are congruent, then the lines that form them are parallel. So because these corresponding angles are congruent, that means that A is parallel to B. Line A is parallel to line B. Then I look for my other relationships. Do I have any other parallel or angle relationships that are true based off of parallel lines? Well, I'm going to look right here where I have 103 and 80 degrees. And that 103 and 80 degrees, they're consecutive interior angles. And consecutive interior angles are supposed to be supplementary when the lines that form them are parallel. Well, 103 plus 80 is 183. That does not equal 180 degrees. So this line B and this line, I'll call it C, this line C are not parallel because consecutive interior angles were not supplementary. So the only ones that we can determine are parallel are lines A and lines B. The next example asks us to find x and the measure of zyn so that PQ is parallel to MN. Well, if line PQ, let's put the line symbol over here. If line PQ is parallel to line MN and this angle and this angle are alternate exterior, then alternate exterior angles are congruent when the lines are parallel. So in order to make sure that these lines are parallel, we would have to set the two angle pairs equal to each other because alternate exterior angles are congruent when the lines that form them are parallel. So my first step is just I'm going to add 25. If you wanted to subtract 7x first, that's fine. It's all a matter of preference. This is 11x equals 7x plus 60. I'm going to go ahead and subtract my 7x from both sides. I'm going to get 4x equals 60. I'm going to divide by 4 on both sides. Oops, forgot my 0. So x should be 115. Okay? Now I found the value of x, but the question was two-part. It said find x and then the measure of zyn. Well, zyn is over here, and it says 7x plus 35. So in order to find zyn, I'm going to plug my 15 into 7x plus 35. And I'm going to get 7 times 15 is 105 plus 35, which gives me 140. So 140 is the measure of angle ZYN. And just to make sure I did this problem right, I'm also going to plug my 15 into PXW because alternate exterior angles are supposed to be congruent, so I'm going to make sure that they are. So I'm going to take 11 times 15, which is 165, and I'm going to subtract 25. That's going to give me 140. So yay, I did the problem correctly. And finally, example 3. If the measure of angle 1 is 94, so I'm going to write that in there, and the measure of angle 3 is 37, is line L parallel to line M? Well, angle 3 and angle 1 don't form any sort of our parallel line relationships. They're not corresponding, they're not alternate exterior, they're not alternate interior, they're not consecutive. But remember from last chapter that we said vertical angles, the ones across from each other, and a linear pair, those relationships are true no matter what kind of parallel lines, skew lines, no matter what, as long as we have two intersecting lines. So let's look for those relationships first to see if we can find one of our parallel line relationships. So I'm going to do vertical angles because those are the easiest. And I'm going to see from doing vertical angles if my consecutive interior angles then become supplementary. So vertical to angle 3 is here, and that's going to be 37. Now, if you notice, I have consecutive interior angles. And consecutive interior angles are supposed to be supplementary. They're supposed to equal 180 degrees if the lines that form them are parallel. Well, does 94 plus 37 equal 180 degrees? No, it equals 131 degrees. So because consecutive interior angles are not supplementary, then lines L and M are not parallel. So, is L parallel to M? No, L is not parallel to M because consecutive interior angles were not supplementary. And consecutive interior angles have to be supplementary if the lines that form them are parallel.